In the summer of 1720, a single share in one London company cost £1,000. By Christmas, it was worth almost nothing. The company had almost no real trade. Its promised riches never existed. And when it fell, it took thousands of fortunes and the trust of a nation down with it. This is the anatomy of the South Sea bubble, the first time a modern market convinced an entire country to believe in nothing at all. It began, as these things often do, with a debt too large to pay. By 1711, Britain had fought long wars, and the government owed money it could not easily repay. It needed a way to carry that debt without collapsing under it. The answer was a new company, founded that year by the Chancellor Robert Harley and a financier named John Blunt. It was given a grand name and a grander promise: exclusive British trade with the rich Spanish colonies of South America. They called it the South Sea Company. But the trade was a fiction. Britain and Spain were rivals, often at war, and the monopoly was worthless whenever they fought. The company would never earn any real profit from it. The one business it did conduct was not glamour, but human cargo. Under a treaty right called the Asiento, the company shipped enslaved Africans to Spanish America, tens of thousands of people, thousands of whom died on the crossing. Even this brought the company little money. So the South Sea Company turned to the only thing it truly had, not a trade, but a scheme. The idea was elegant and dangerous. The company would take over the government's national debt. People who were owed money by the state held stiff, unsellable government bonds. The company offered to swap those bonds for something new and exciting: shares in the South Sea Company itself. For the government, it was a relief. Its heavy interest payments would shrink. For the company, it was the opportunity of the century, because the company's profit came from a simple gap. The higher its share price climbed, the fewer shares it needed to hand over for each pound of debt, and the more was left over for itself. Which meant the men running the company had one overwhelming interest: not to trade, not to build, but to make the price go up. And so they built a machine to lift it. First, they lent people money to buy the very shares they were selling, using those same shares as security. Buyers borrowed from the company to bet on the company. Then came the favors. To the well-connected, shares were handed out with no money down, and a quiet promise: sell them back whenever you like and keep the rise. And to the men who could vote the scheme into law, the company offered something plainer still: money, measured precisely by how high the price would go. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, John Aislabi, was promised a sum for every pound the share price rose. So were lords, secretaries, and members of the king's own court. Even the king's mistresses were written into the arithmetic of the rise. The men meant to guard the public purse now had a private reason to want the bubble to grow. The regulators had become shareholders. All that remained was to convince everyone else. And in 1720, everyone else was ready to believe. In January, a share cost about £128. By March, as the scheme moved through Parliament, the frenzy began. £330. Coffee houses filled with talk of nothing else. Servants speculated beside dukes. Fortunes were made on paper in an afternoon. And the mania spread. Dozens of imitators sprang up overnight, promising wild ventures, one so vague its prospectus offered only a scheme of great advantage, but no one to know what it is. By June, the South Sea share had passed £890. The company, jealous of its rivals, pushed a new law through Parliament to crush them. It was called the Bubble Act. Sold as protection against fraud, it was written by the greatest fraud of all, to clear the field for itself. For a few weeks, it worked. With rivals swept aside, the money poured into one stock alone. And in early August, the South Sea share touched its peak: £1,000. It was the top of the world. It was also the end. The trouble with a price built on borrowed money is that it can only rise while people keep buying. The moment they stopped, there was nothing underneath. Insiders quietly had already begun to sell. As the summer ended, the selling became a stampede. Those who had borrowed from the company to buy now had to sell to repay it, and every sale drove the price down further, forcing the next. By late September, the £1,000 share was worth about $150. By the end of the year, it had fallen almost to where it began. The fortune had never been real. Now the paper proved it. What vanished was not a body count. It was something quieter and vast. The savings of thousands of families, from laborers to lords, gone in a matter of weeks. Banks that had lent against the shares failed with them. Trust, the thing that makes any market work, drained out of the city of London. A ruined public wanted answers and names. In December, Parliament was recalled, and a committee of secrecy began to open the company's books. What they found was not a run of bad luck. It was fraud, deliberate and documented, running from the company's directors into the heart of the government. The company had kept a second, secret set of accounts. The bribes, once denied, were there in the ledgers, in figures and initials. John Aislabi, the chancellor who had shepherded the scheme, was found guilty of the most notorious and dangerous corruption. He was expelled from Parliament and imprisoned in the Tower. The company's directors, 33 of them, were stripped of their estates. On average, more than 4/5 of their wealth was confiscated and returned to the victims. Two of the men most deeply implicated, the Craggs father and son, did not live to face the verdict. They died in disgrace as the inquiry closed in. But the inquiry stopped short of one door. The king himself and the court around him had taken the company's shares. The man who made sure that door stayed shut was Robert Walpole. He managed the wreckage, protected the crown from exposure, and by doing so made himself indispensable. They called him the Screen. He shielded the powerful from the full reckoning, and in the calm that followed, he became the most powerful man in Britain, the first to be called, in all but name, Prime Minister. The scheme's architect, John Blunt, lost most of his fortune to the confiscations. The men who built the machine were, in the end, ground up by it, and the law the company had written to protect itself, the Bubble Act, remained on the books for more than a century, freezing the way Britain formed companies until 1825. The South Sea Company itself did not vanish. Stripped and shrunken, it lingered for another century, a hollow reminder pinned to the nation's debt. But the bubble left something larger than one ruined company. It left a pattern, a promise of impossible returns, a price cut loose from anything real, insiders selling while the public buys, and regulators who own the very thing they are meant to watch. Every bubble since has been in its own way a copy of this one. The tulip fields and the railway booms, the companies of 1929 and the debts of 2008, all of them running the same machine the South Sea directors first assembled in a London coffee house. A line was later attributed to Isaac Newton, who is said to have held the stock, that he could calculate the motion of the heavens, but not the madness of men. Whether he ever said it, we cannot be sure, but the sentiment has outlived the doubt, because it keeps coming true. The South Sea bubble was not a failure of arithmetic. The numbers were understood perfectly well. It was a failure of the thing numbers cannot hold. The willingness of people, together, to believe. If the forgotten deserve a witness, and the pattern deserves to be remembered, subscribe. The next inquiry is already open. Cold Wake, an autopsy of how proud things come apart.